right, so here we are, everybody. This is an MS Views Now program, and I am Stuart Schlossman. I'm president and founder of MS Views and News. And by the way, we are sponsored tonight by Genentech. I wanted to let you all know that as well. Our guest for tonight is Lisa Gonzalez Goetz, and Lisa has been practicing for 30 years. She's a specialist of Social Security disability law, and she does Social Security disability law and veterans law. She's 30th year of practice, specifically Social Security disability and veterans law. She also does a lot with Medicare Advantage planning. So she now has a insurance company called We Get Your Insurance, and she does this in 30 different states. So if there's anybody online that needs to know more about, like, say, Medicare Advantage planning and insurance, you can speak with Lisa and her team about that separately. That you could ask questions about that tonight as well if you'd like, but specifically we will be speaking about Social Security disability law updates, the application process, eligibility, and so on. So let's welcome Lisa, and she'll be speaking for about 30 minutes, and then I'll come back online and we'll do some Q&A. All right, take it away, Lisa.
Thank you, everybody. I haven't answered any questions or spoken to you in a format. I have individually to people, but not since November of 2021. So it's nice to be back. Thank you. Just so that you know, I will start by giving you my information. I will repeat it at the end. But if anybody has any questions on the show, off the show, in a week, in a month, in a year, my email is my name, Lisa, Lisa, at GG, like good, law, LAW.info for information. So it's Lisa at gglaw.info. And the name of my firm is Gonzalez and Goetz. And in Goetz, the O is silent. So it's Goetz. I am always open to answering any questions. I'm going to just shoot with a few of the most the new things that I have coming in, what has transpired after COVID, during COVID, and with the administration and some of the changes that have gone on with Social Security. There hasn't been many changes, but they seem to be some up and coming. So within the next couple of years, we're going to see some changes in disability and the way they analyze disability benefits with regard to the listing, the age of retirement changing, the ability to work and how much work you can make before you get disqualified for Social Security. So we will talk about that in depth. Right now, for 2023, the amount of work activity that you could do went up to $1,470. So that's $1,470 per month. After that, you won't be able to receive disability benefits because they'll consider that the work you were doing is substantial and gainful. So the figures go up every year. For 2023, it's $1,470. And then the amount of money that you have to work to qualify for disability benefits also went up a little bit. So you have to have worked 5 out of the last 10 years in order to collect benefits under your account. That's a rule of thumb. There's some exceptions, but every year is associated with 4 quarters. And right now, if you earn $1,640, and if anybody needs this repeated, just email me and I'll give you the amounts, but $1,640 earns you a quarter. And if you've worked $6,560 per year, will cover you. So the numbers are pretty low, even though they've gone up. But if you've earned $6,560 in a given year, that will be considered 4 quarters of coverage. And you need 5 out of the last 10 years to qualify under your account. You should know that for Social Security purposes, we get asked oftentimes, why do I need an attorney? Or hiring an attorney is going to cost me money. Let me tell you that whether you hire an attorney or an advocate, which is not an attorney, they are only charging you if they win a case. So we don't charge unless we win. We won't take a case unless we believe we can win the case. And the reason is because we won't get paid. So as much as it's been my practice, my lifelong practice, my devotion to represent people with disabilities and go after what I believe they're entitled to by law and go against the government. As much as it's my passion, I don't work pro bono and I'm not a social worker. So we do work for profit, but we would only take your case if we believe we can win it. So with that said, you have to know that you only pay once you've received your payment. So you have nothing to lose. You could call attorneys. You can try to see whether or not they believe that you qualify based on your diagnoses, your impairments. I'm going to go a little bit through what you need specifically for MS, because that seems to be an appropriate question to answer here. In order to prove that you're disabled. So it's not simply enough to say I've been diagnosed. It's not simply enough to say I was fired because I couldn't do my job. You have to show that you're not able to work because of your impairment. So those two things have to be tied together. With a diagnosis of MS, Let me start by saying many years ago, MS was hard to diagnose, as was fibromyalgia, as is currently long haul COVID. So there are a lot of impairments that take a long time to get on the books of Social Security and get the administrative notice where now you qualify and it's an actual impairment that is acknowledged and accepted and considered by Social Security disability. So the listing of impairments are requirements where if you meet certain criteria, your benefits should be approved automatically. But many, many, many times they're not. And the reason is because even though you may have 90% of the criteria, you missed 100%. Or maybe you have skills that they can turn around and say, well, this may be true, but you are working, so you don't qualify. So every case is very individual, and it's important that you get the advice of a professional. There are a lot of advocates out there. They are either non-attorney representatives that represent individuals applying for disability, or they are advocates that have taken an exam, college. I believe they have to go to college and graduate. And some of them could be very good at representing you or doing your paperwork. But if you don't win the case at a hearing level, then your case ends there. Nobody's really appealing the judge's decision or appealing the appeals council into federal court. So the fees are always, whether it's an attorney or non-attorney, the fees are always based on the win. If you win your case, you're entitled to benefits. Those retroactive fees get separated, and some of the retroactive fees go to the attorney or representative. So you're paying the same amount. You don't pay more because it's an attorney, but you do get better representation in terms of being able to appeal and go all the way. You don't see many attorneys appeal cases, basically, and a non-attorney is just not able to. So that's something to definitely keep in mind. With MS, there's a listing of impairment. It's 11.09, if anybody's taking notes. And the 11.09, if you just Google it, gives you MS, multiple sclerosis characterized by A and B criteria. And very quickly, I only have a half an hour, I can talk volumes on what you need to do to represent and win a case successfully, but it really deals with whether there's disorganization of a motor function of two extremities, results in extreme limitation and in an inability to stand up from a seated position, balance while standing or walking, or use of upper extremities. So that's one way to kind of assess if you're there. You may consider applying for disability benefits. Another aspect could be that MS is affecting you cognitively and not physically. So that's the criteria B of the same listing, 11.09. And that criteria is having one of the physical function limitations, not much. However, having problems with understanding, remembering, or applying information, or interacting with others, or concentration, persistence, and pace. Another aspect of that same B criteria would be adapting or managing oneself. So if you start falling within any of these symptoms, speak to your doctor, speak to your family, speak to your employer if you're currently working, and it would be time to consider applying for disability. The process takes a long time. Even now with COVID, I'm finding that we're in 2023, May of 2023, and the process is actually finally starting to move quicker. But either way, even though it's moving quicker, it's still a long, lengthy process. So there's a lot of stress involved, a lot of paperwork involved, a lot of phone calls. Sometimes doctors will be scheduled for you to go and see. So for all these reasons, you do it when you first have any of these characterized symptoms, and your doctor and speaking to an attorney, such as myself, can in combination guide you so that you could get the most favorable outcome as quickly as possible. Social Security has increased their decision rates. They are approving more cases than they have in the past. I would say statistically it's gone up between 1% and 4% in terms of approval rates. And I believe that that has to do with the unfortunate task of reviewing cases that have been sitting in the pipeline for very, very long during COVID. Social Security offices were closed. They did some work from home. They were not so accountable with their work. It's very difficult to reach people. The local offices were closed. Then when they reopened, they were reopened with appointment only. So for those reasons, I believe a lot of these approvals were approvals that should have been given and granted years ago. With that said, the wait times have decreased. So it's a nice combination. We hope to see more traction with that way, where if you're applying for benefits, you qualify, you should be awarded benefits sooner, you should see higher ratings and shorter wait times. So we hope that this trajectory continues. But there's no saying. So finding your physical limitations, finding help with your doctor that will support you filing for disability will be very helpful, and putting those two things in combination with family support and doctor treatments and objective records. So let's talk very quickly about objective testing. I am not a doctor. I do sit in often and listen to doctors. I argue with doctors often, and I do respect enormously the doctors that have assisted Stuart with MS Views and News. And I believe that they're right on point with the imaging that is required. So for the disorganization of the motor function and difficulties in both extremities, either upper or with balancing, they're looking for objective records, objective medical testing. They could be ECGs, they could be MRIs, they could be brain scans. They have to be objective. So when you put this together and you go to a proper MS doctor, it's a shoe-in. It's a really, really nice situation. Unfortunately, a lot of Americans are lacking the ability to afford insurance. And if they do afford insurance, they certainly don't have an MS specialist. So these programs are great because it educates you and you're able to advocate for yourself with any doctors that you do have. But it's really important to seek treatment from a professional that's versed in MS, because then they're not labeling your problems with a herniated disc, or they're not labeling your problems with depression or anxiety or situational because you have financial stressors, economic stressors. They're actually diagnosing and they have the objective records to prove it. So by way of that, and this criteria works for any person applying for disability, but for MS, because it starts as such a slow progressive disease and hard to diagnose for many. It is important to have that. So I hope I'm on pace, because it's a little bit, I'm here, I feel like I'm just talking, but I hope I'm giving some good inspirational information and useful information for anybody out there, anybody who knows somebody applying for disability benefits, or for yourself. There are resources out there to help you. Very important, don't wait until you mess up to get yourself an attorney. Many times people apply. I had a person today that called me yesterday on my cell phone. I'm always available. And he called asking me if I'd represent him for tomorrow's hearing, which was today. And it was a great case, so I said yes. Took on the representation, explained to the judge we needed some more time, wanted to take testimony, and I believe this individual will have a favorable outcome. But there was a lot of cleanup that we had to do, because he's gone through a year and a half of giving information to Social Security and the administration, talking to doctors or not going to doctors, and it was not a surprise that he was denied so many times. But this was actually a case that I could sit in and pitch hit in today because I had availability in my schedule. So if you think you want to apply, we take cases at every level, at the beginning, at the reconsideration, at the request for hearing. But the sooner we get the case, the easier it is for us to kind of navigate it and give Social Security all the information that they need. The main reason you would work for a disability attorney is so that they could obviously win your case. They can also help you with a lot of the paperwork that you receive. You get appeals that you have to do within 60 days, and they're timely. So once you have an attorney, everything you receive gets copied also to an attorney. So we both get the same thing, and we're able to navigate all the appeals, all the paperwork, all the doctor appointments at the same time. So that really streamlines the case, and it makes it easy for us to hand your case to the Social Security Administration on a silver platter, with the hope that you'll get a favorable outcome sooner. One of the questions that was asked of me oftentimes is, what are the major changes since the pandemic? And I would say that we had a lot of times that the phone hearings were done. It's not even by Zoom, because, as you know, it's very complicated to get on. It wasn't Zoom, it's Microsoft Teams, and you get a code, and it was very complicated. So we do them by phone. There are a lot of people on the phone. It's almost like a party line, like 4 or 5 people maybe on the phone call at once. That's new. So it'll be the judge, the attorney, you, the client, a vocational expert, a hearing assistant for the judge that takes notes and connects the phones, and then finally, if necessary, a medical doctor who's also present. So all these people are on the phone at the same time. At the beginning of COVID, it was like, wow, what do you do with this? Like, it's a little bit crazy. But the truth is, it went very smoothly. The judge holds the case. You know not to speak above anybody else. You're asked questions preliminarily to make sure that you are who you say you are. Um, they swear you in. You have to make sure that your phone is fully charged, that the ringer's on, because many people don't have their ringer on, and then they're waiting for a hearing for a year and a half and their ringer isn't on, and that's terrible. But it does happen. But the hearings go very smoothly. They actually have continued the hearings this way if the client wants it. So now it's no longer required. Now it's up to the client. And many times, getting to a hearing at the same time that you have to get there, and time, going through security, parking, is a very stressful thing to navigate and negotiate. So our clients have opted over and over and over again with very favorable outcomes to do it over the phone. They can do it in their room, the comfort of their home. They have their privacy. They have their medications right next to them. They could take some notes if they want to remember what they want to ask at the hearing, or make sure that everything, oh geez, wait, I forgot, I also have problems remembering, and I'm only talking about, my leg and my walker, and I forgot that I forget things. So if you have it written down, it's a lot smoother. We've had a lot of very, very favorable outcomes that way. So the phone hearings continue. It allows us personally to take more cases on a nationwide basis, without having to travel. Clients feel very comfortable. They're not compromised. They don't have to worry about being exposed to any kind of illness, COVID, a cold, anything at all. So, and the hearing seems to go quicker also over the phone. So those are the major changes. It was only phone hearing, no in person. Now you can choose in person. Most people are doing phones, and we're continuing that trend quite successfully, I would add. So those are one of the changes after the pandemic in applying or receiving Social Security. And like I said, more people are receiving favorable outcomes. And the timelines that you were seeing in the pandemic, where people had cases and they were just bottlenecked, those are progressing nicely. One of the questions that's always asked is, what is the difference between SSI and SSDI? Earlier on, the first thing I was talking about were the numbers that you needed of quarters to pay into the system. That's FICA. When you've paid into the system, and if you've worked 5 out of the last 10 years, then you would be applying for SSDI. If you haven't worked, or if you've not worked enough quarters, then you would be applying for SSI. SSI is a program that is meant to help disabled individuals that are also indigent, financially indigent. So you have to meet the financial criteria to qualify for SSI. I had a client yesterday who had been on SSI for 9 years, and suddenly he had a car accident and he received a sum of money for his motor vehicle accident when they settled that. And that amount of money that he received was over the $2,000 resource limit. And so he was disqualified from receiving SSI. So by getting that motor vehicle accident money and not seeking an attorney, because there are ways to shelter that money, he actually got himself off the program, losing his Medicaid. And after all the money was depleted from his motor vehicle settlement, Then he had to reapply for Social Security benefits, and we were successful in obtaining his SSI case, but we had to prove that his disability continued, and we also had to prove that now he has no money again, and that was the way he won. So the difference between SSDI and SSI is SSDI is when you paid money into the system. It's known as a Title II, and it's based on your work earnings. And the amount of money you would be receiving would be dependent on how much money you pay into the system. With regard to SSI, you've never paid into the system, or you paid but not enough. And so therefore you have to show that you're also financially indigent. So there's two types of programs. Sometimes you're both programs. Maybe you worked, but you didn't pay a lot into Social Security, you're still indigent, you would qualify for both programs. When somebody is looking to apply for Social Security disability, the first thing I would ask them is, have you worked? Try to establish, did you work 5 out of the last 10 years? Do you have enough quarters of coverage? Or are you short? Which application do we need to apply for you? And then we need to see, why did you stop working? Is it because you weren't able to perform the work? And if you weren't able to perform that particular work, is there any other work that you may be able to perform in the national economy? If you can prove that there's no other work you could perform in the national economy because of a medical condition, then you can win your case. So help from doctors is very, very important. Like I said before, and I tell my clients on a daily basis, I'm not a medical doctor. I can't diagnose you, but I can work with the diagnoses that the doctors give you based on the medications that you take. What kind of medications? How often are they changed? Trying to find the right medication for you. And when you take them, do you have any side effects? And what kind of side effects? Are they stomach aches? Are they drowsiness? All these effects of your medication could prevent you from working. And I have won cases based on side effects of medication only, if the medication is required for you to take. So those are very, very independent, individualized, not independent, individualized cases. And that's why every case is treated very differently. And that's why a lot of cases are harder to prove, because it has to do with your age, your education, your work experience, and the residuals that you have despite having disability and limitations. What are you able to do? What can you focus on doing? And can that be translatable to a job that's 40 hours a week on a continuous basis? So those are the basic foundations of disability on a very clear note. I will tell you that if you look at our website, there are a lot of case studies, a lot of clients and active cases that I take. I've now evolved to writing a blog on them and giving you an example of a variety of cases in different parts of urban and rural America, and what age a person is and what happens at a hearing. And you can look at that. There's also some changes that have gone on in terms of the long haul COVID, which I briefly talked about. And since COVID, you know, that's now being more and more addressed. I did put something on the website about it, where they're looking at it, they're really considering long haul COVID, and they have decided, a recent article in the Scientific American's February 2023 issue, titled "Long COVID Now Looks Like a Neurological Disease." and they're trying to help doctors focus on treatment. So the importance of that is now we may see in the next few years legislation and laws and listings about how to analyze and interpret long haul COVID. Right now, it's just starting, and it's for individuals who have tested positive for COVID and despite testing negative, continue to suffer for symptoms for more than 3 months. The medical profession calls it post-acute sequel of COVID-19, or PASC, and it includes symptoms of fatigue, pain, and individuals who are having problems remembering and focusing. Many applying for or receiving disability benefits are high-risk individuals, which suffer from rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, cancer patients, which have a higher risk of having these issues of COVID diagnosis. So it's still in the very early stages, but you can see that at least the scientific world is addressing it, is trying to find a way to diagnose it, find objective records. I have seen people that fall into this category, but again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not getting doctors to kind of support that. So I'll have an individual pulmonologist tell me about their breathing and a rheumatologist tell me about their arthritis, and I'll have a neurologist tell me about the limitations. But I don't have like one doctor that can pinpoint all these impairments are based on this diagnosis. But I do have people, a particular person who suffers from swollen lymph nodes, has severe tachycardia, post 3 months, 6 months, a year after having had COVID and testing negative. They have been diagnosed with a pulmonary embolism, and that has created throat problems, hearing problems, which we can't even talk about how it's created anxiety, discourse, depression. It's gone through the gamut. So is this associated with COVID? Nobody really knows why certain individuals are affected differently. But, you know, the most important thing for me as a practitioner is to know that they are addressing this. And by addressing this, it means that Social Security will have to follow lead. And even if you don't have a diagnosis like this, you would be able to say, based on all these problems, a person is A, not able to work, B, because of a physical or mental impairment, C, which prevents them from working 40 hours a week on a sustained basis. So we put all that together with the medical records and the complaints and treatments, and we end up being successful in the case. So those are the cases that we're seeing more and more now. And it's because we deal with a pool of people that already have underlying medical conditions that are pre-existing and makes them more of a high risk. So it's not a surprise, and it's not a surprise likewise that they're doing hearings by phone or offering them. I think the judges also feel more comfortable that way. So we do have hearings in person. Those are based on the individual client if they really want to be in person, but generally it's now through the phone. So I can keep talking. I know that I've passed my 30 minutes, but I'm happy to talk to you. I'm really eager to hear questions and know how I can help you guys. One of the questions that I often get also is, how much can I work and still get Social Security benefits? I've been getting benefits for the last 10 years or 5 years or 2 years, and I really want to go back to work. I've been offered disability to do work, I don't know, tutoring or working from home or helping answer calls. Can I please work? And it is my hope that everybody should be able to have good health insurance and work. And I would never want to dissuade anybody from working. I will tell you that once you start working, when you are receiving benefits, you are automatically throwing up a red flag and saying, I may not be able to work 40 hours a week, but I can do some work. And once you open that red flag, you start saying, well, maybe those 10 hours can be 15 or 20, and little by little, the government could turn around and cut your benefits. So working will create red flags. So think about it very carefully. Speak to your doctor, speak to your attorney, and get some really good, solid advice before you make that decision. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you for being on. And I've got a lot of questions for you. And one of the prime things that I think a lot of people are online for is that they want to know what the process is. I mean, how do you get started? How do you even know that you should apply? Or, people might be saying, "Are you having all these difficulties working?" A lot of people say, "Hey, you should just consider going on disability." But what are the key reasons why a person should go on to or apply for Social Security disability income?
Okay. If you have a mental or physical impairment that you feel prevents you individually from working 40 hours a week on a consistent basis, and you are under the care of a physician for these problems, you should consider applying. You don't need to wait to be out of work for a year before you apply. You have to anticipate that you are not going to be able to work. At any time that you feel that way, you should pick up the phone and speak to a professional.
Okay, but going further along with this, so what if a person was never really working full-time, but maybe part-time? What can you say to anybody that's in this position and can no longer work their 30 or 35 hours a week?
Okay, so the question is whether or not they would qualify for SSDI or SSI, right? So if a person has enough quarters of coverage and their work was always part-time, but they are not able to work part-time or full-time because of their condition, they should apply. If the person does not have enough quarters of coverage, is work part-time, but not enough to give them the quarters of coverage, and they apply for SSI, but they're married and their spouse makes more money that brings them above this financial eligibility limit, then they won't qualify. So those are things that an individual, unless you go on ssa.gov, which you can type in your social security number and get information about your work history. Sometimes people have no idea what they qualify for, and we start that way. But the lines of communication always go that way.
All right, thank you. Before I go on with questions, and by the way, I do have questions from the people online as well. I do have questions from people that wrote in their questions when they registered to be on this program. But I also have questions for you as well. But there are a lot of people who came in after we began the program tonight. I just want to let them know who you are and everybody that's online. This is our guest tonight. This is Lisa Gonzalez Goetz. We gave a whole opening for her at the beginning, and I'm sorry you won't be able to get to hear that again. But if you watch the recorded version, and yes, I'm saying this on purpose because for everybody that's going to ask, are we recording this? The answer is yes. It'll be on our YouTube channel in about a month, maybe a month and a half, because we are far behind getting these things published. And also, everybody, I am Stuart Schlossman, president of MS Views and News, and I am your peer, okay, which is why I want to do all these things and get these programs out here. All right, so let's go back to the process you were just talking about. People need to know how long they need to wait. How do they have the finances, the financial security, set aside because the process that it's going to be? And could you tell them how long, tell them about this process and how long it could possibly take to actually get awarded and have no income coming in the meantime?
So the process takes, on average, 1.5 to 3 years. Okay. Before you even get into this process, it's very important to have as many of your ducks as you can lined up in a row, meaning your doctor's on board, which will help expedite the case, because if you qualify because you have a listing and all the testing has been done, that may make your process a little quicker. You want to make sure you have family support, because you are going to be without income and it is going to be hard. Some people pay to their retirement. Some people heavily rely on spouses, parents, family members. Unfortunately, I see daily people that are living in shelters, people that are homeless. My biggest suggestion for anybody is that when you start getting ill, particularly with MS, you don't wait until you're really, really bad shape, because you're going to continue to deteriorate. It's a progressive illness, and there's very little sympathy for expediting cases.
So going beyond that for a minute, I have to stop you that it's totally disabling of an illness, and that's why we have all these great medications out there right now, is to keep us from getting worse. So that brings us to the next point, is that for while a lot of us are not really getting worse or too much worse than we were 10, 15, 20 years ago, how does that keep us on Social Security disability income? What prevents the government from coming after you and saying, hey, we hear that from somebody that you're doing well, and we want to take this away from you. So what does a person have to do then to keep their insurance, keep their income?
So if that happens, let's say that the government comes after and says, we're going to review your benefits and we're going to review your ability to receive. You have 10 days, 10 days to file an appeal and continue getting your benefits while the appeal goes through. Okay. So that's the first thing. If you don't file an appeal asking for your benefits to continue while you are doing this appeal, they will stop the payments immediately, or on the 11th day, theoretically. Okay. Then what do you do to win your case? There is a concept that we use that you may be stabilized, but you're not improved. So the law is very, very clear and says it's a continuing disability review based on improvement. And if you can show through your doctors that you are not improved, the medications you're taking are working, your condition has not continued to deteriorate, but you are stabilized, that should be a win.
Okay, thank you for that.
I hope I answered that.
I'm sure that people could understand that, and if they can't, they could ask a question, all right? I'm going to take some of the questions online because we do have quite a few, and everybody, I need to let you know, I am going to say your first name. Unless it's really odd, like Alexander Geddelhopper, I won't say your name, all right? But for a Kathy, there's a lot of you out there. So first one from Kathy, based on something you were just talking about, she writes, I've only been working part-time for a little over a year. Would I qualify? Before I went part-time, though, I was working full-time.
You should qualify. You should be fine. Go on SSA.gov or get a printout of your earnings record. You should be fine because you have 5 out of the last 10 years of quarter coverage.
Right. Well, that's something I guess we needed to know, is how long was she working full-time for before going part-time, right?
Okay. Right. So SSA.gov will show you all the earnings.
Okay, great. All right, next we have a Stephanie. What do you do when long-term disability and your doctor believes you can still do what your job was before and you don't feel comfortable doing it for cognitive reasons? I want to work, but just doing something else, why can't I be trained to do something else?
So for Social Security disability, you have to show that you're not able to work. If you want to work doing something else, then there are different organizations such as vocational rehab or other jobs that may train you. In that capacity, Social Security disability would not be a program for you. If you had long-term disability benefits and your doctor thinks you're able to return to that employment, then you need to either find yourself another doctor or you need to find yourself another job if you think. But if you feel that you're not able to because of cognitive reasons, you always need a medical professional that's going to back you up with testing and progress notes and supporting your physician.
Okay, thank you. Renee asks, if you retire early due to disability, are you still eligible for SSDI?
Renee, I just took a case today of a 64-year-old woman who was receiving early retirement. And the goal was, instead of her receiving only 80%, for her to go up to 100%, which would also give her the Medicare. So yeah, you can do that. Again, you have to hire a professional that wants to take your case in, because the retroactivity now, instead of receiving 100% of your disability, you're only fighting for 20%. But yes, that happens frequently.
Okay, thank you. Michael writes, once approved for SSDI, what happens when you hit full retirement age?
They transfer you from one program into another internally, just as a matter of happenstance.
So if you're able to change then from SSDI and then go into just full retirement income, can you then, if you feel like you can put in some hours working, is it an issue, or will anything ever be taken away from you?
That's a great question, which I don't know the answer to. I don't think it should matter, because at that point you're receiving your retirement and of your age. So, I mean, I wouldn't think that it matters, but I have never had that question, so I don't know the answer to it. If you want to email me, I can find the answer to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And Tony writes, is it possible to acquire more than one attorney? Just curious.
So we've had individuals who have had attorneys, fired them, and then had another attorney and fired them. In that aspect, you can have more than one attorney, but with Social Security, you only have one attorney that represents you. So any previous attorney has to be out of the case. So you don't have like a legal team of counsels the way you do, when you see, I don't know, OJ's trial, or a lot of, different attorneys all together. You don't have that. You have one attorney.
Great. Thank you for that. So a person named Irene wrote a long statement, which I shared with the whole group. She's saying that you'll frequently be sent for a mental status exam. Can you please tell everybody what that's about?
During the process of applying for Social Security and being denied in several different levels, the Social Security Administration is able to send you to a consultative evaluator to evaluate the impairments you're alleging. Long word to say, you say that you're depressed, we have the right to send you to a doctor to see whether the depression, anxiety is preclusive to work. But that's the same case. It's not just a mental exam. Consultative evaluations can be with orthopedics, could be for vision testing, could be for doctors, could be for internists, pulmonologists. So it's not just the mental exam, but if you are alleging stress, depression, anxiety, learning disabilities, they have a right to examine you.
Okay.
And it's at their cost. It's at the government's cost.
Great, thank you. So people are asking, and I'm not asking you to give the answer right now. We'll keep them online for this. They're asking for your email address, but don't say it. I want them to stay here until the end, and then we'll get it from you. Okay?
Actually, right. Stu, I said it in the beginning, and I said I would say it at the end.
Great, awesome, thank you. All right, Deborah writes: is the amount you can work monthly or yearly, based on, I guess, what you were saying earlier about how people can do some work?
Deborah, that's a great question. That's always at issue at a hearing. That's always a debatable question because the amount is per month, but we argue it to the judges that let's say you made over the amount of money in for a month or two. If you were to extend that to 12 months, it's well below. So we use the amounts. We calculate it per year, but the government calculates it per month. We have been very successful calculating it per year because it's a very passionate argument that you should not be harmed because you're trying to work.
Great, thank you. And Cindy wants to comment based on something that we were just talking about with the doctors and being the mental exam. Stating that normally the IRS would require you to be seen by a doctor that works with the SSA. Is that correct? Or Social Security Administration?
The IRS?
No, I said the wrong letters. SSA, not IRS. Okay? I got IRS on the brain. I was working on taxes.
No, you got to repeat the question because I stopped when I heard the IRS. I'm like, beyond my scope. What is the question again? I'm so sorry.
Basically, what was being said was that when you're asked by a Social Security Administration to see a doctor, that Cindy is stating that they normally want you to see one of their doctors when it comes to like the mental competency or anything to do with depression and et cetera.
Okay, so it does not substitute your own doctors. You should be under treatment. You should be going to your own doctors. They have a right to send you to their doctors to see if there's fabrication, malingering. They have a right to do that because they are the ones that will ultimately pay you the funds that you're seeking. But it doesn't substitute your doctor. But yes, they have the right to do it. They don't always do it. As a matter of fact, today I had a case where the person had severe depression and anxiety. The way it was over the phone, and it was very hard to understand, but the claimant was actively crying at the hearing about an issue that had no relation to the disability. And I asked for one of these examinations. This person was indigent, had no mental treatment, was applying for a physical problem, which was diabetes uncontrolled, but emotionally, he was so obviously far gone and stressed out that I asked the judge to please send him to a consultative for a mental evaluation, which I think ultimately will come in and show he has additional impairments. So, but they're not your doctors, Stu. So just to wrap it up, they're not your doctors, so they don't normally come in and give you a favorable report. So that's why I say they never substitute your own doctor.
Okay, thank you. All right, next, beating around the bush here a little bit. The person asks, on the disability homeowners exemption, DHE, do we have to fill out that form every year if we're disabled? Do you know about that? That sounds like a tax
attorney. I don't know about that.
That's a tax attorney. You'll have to ask your husband, right? Okay. Jesse writes, I've been asked to interview by some companies, but I didn't know that because of his MS or her MS that I can't work if it gets to a point where I can't work anymore again, how would I get my benefits back? In other words, they're on Social Security now. They're asked to interview, go back to work maybe, but if the if the disability gets bad again, how would they get their benefits back again?
So Social Security has it's almost like a back to work incentive. They give you a 9-month trial work period. It's a lifelong period. So during any period of disability where you're receiving benefits, you could go back to work. You can make any amount of money you want. You have 9 months of a trial work period. If you are successful, you're discontinued from the program. And if you needed to apply, you would have to start all over again.
Okay. So a little bit spin off from that question, Deborah writes, If a person is currently working full-time and has asked to work fewer hours because the MS is interfering, is it better then to apply when hours are reduced, possibly for a number of years, or wait until a person can't work at all?
So it really is dependent on how much you get paid per hour, how many hours you're working, how you're performing your duties. Because you could work is defined in terms of a number of money, and it could also be defined as a term of hours per week that you're working. Meaning, if you work one day and you sell a house and you get a commission that's above the amount of money, then you're working. If you are working very little and you're making very little money, then that's something that you negotiate. So definitely not while you're working full time. The definition of disability is pretty strict. No work for a period of 12 months or more because of a mental or physical condition that precludes work. So it's on a case-by-case basis. In that case, maybe you'd want to stay for my email at the end and maybe shoot me an email with very specifics, and I'll be happy to answer.
Great, thank you. All right, Tamara is asking similarly to the retirement age, I guess, for being on when you switch over from SSDI to retirement. If you could just repeat that again, please.
Yes, sure. If you are at the age of retirement and you're already receiving benefits, they internally switch you from one program to another.
Great, thank you. And Irene, yes, I understand what you're saying. It's what she meant when she was writing her long thing about having to see a doctor, that sometimes the mental evaluation is very helpful for your claims. But I also know people where it actually went against them. So what happens when you go to see their doctors and their doctors don't agree with what your doctors have said? Then what happens?
Then you go to court and you find yourself a really good attorney like me, and then we take care of it. I mean, it's their doctors. They don't have a relationship with you. They see you for a period of time of 30 minutes, 40 minutes, if that long. And yeah, oftentimes they're not favorable. I said that. But you know, you need a successful advocate.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Cindy writes, regarding being awarded benefits with the lag time that has occurred within the SSA, how do they take into account the progressive changing nature of the disease? Your score from the time of submission could drastically change, could change significantly by the time the case even gets the attention of the courts. What would you say?
Cindy, right? I would say that that's the case with every single case. And it is my belief that when a person who has always worked stops working or feels that they're not able to work, it's because they feel their condition is disabling and severe enough. The lag time and the progression, and a case where an individual is deteriorating, decompensating, having more problems as the case lags on, almost feeds into the government, because they turn around and they try to negotiate. And the government is very good at that. And the judges will say, you know, Lisa, why don't we try, or they call me, you know, Attorney Gonzalez Goetz, why don't we try to see a happy medium? Maybe it really wasn't 2019, like they said. Perhaps it was when these records show that they really got a lot worse, and I'll be willing to pay the case as of 2022. And I don't often fall into that, because I feel very strongly that a person who's not working is not working because they're not able to. If, in fact, something severe happened and the client says to me, you know what, let's just take it, please, because I don't want to wait another year for an appeal, I won't let my ego get in the way. And I'll concede and I'll do what's best for the client. But they do that negotiation daily.
Okay, thank you for that. So Tamara writes, if you publish an article or a story and you get royalties from the publishers, how is that considered against the SSDI, or is that passive income?
It depends when you wrote the article. So I have a stuntman who gets royalties for movies that every time anybody watches a movie, he gets a royalty. And I have a group of stuntmen out of California, like big time, like Mel Gibson, Dupes, and like big guys, and they get a ton of royalties. However, they're disabled. So that's passive income because the work was performed prior to their disability. So if you published an article on something that you had written prior, it shouldn't affect you. But if you published it recently and receiving royalties and you're on benefits, it's going to affect you.
Okay. What other forms of passive income are there that people can know about that they can do other than real estate, where they could still earn a living?
Well, if you do something to collect passive income, it's not passive income. And I'm not a tax person, so I hate to put it that way. But passive income is really people that knew you before, that are paying you for work you had done in the past. Dividends is passive income. Sometimes people get, you mentioned real estate. Sometimes people get monies from a house they sold a year ago before they applied for disability. That's passive. It's really hard because passive is really defined by the IRS, and Social Security follows that to the letter.
Okay.
So I can't give advice on that.
Okay. Is Social Security disability taxable income?
No.
That depends on how much you're making from it.
I'll pass the floor to you, Stuart.
I think the number is 25,000 that you're allowed to get clean. All right. But if you're making anything over 25,000, whatever it is that's above the 25,000 becomes taxable. In the state of Florida anyway, I don't know if that's federally across the United States or what.
Well, by asking that question, and I'm sorry, it just seemed like I didn't know, because if you're making above that money, then you're working according to Social Security disability. So the question was really Social Security.
No, it is Social Security. So there are people that get more than 25,000 a year in Social Security.
Right.
Which leads us to the next question, which is, I forgot where the question went, but is there just a set number that you get for the rest of your life when you're first granted disability? Okay, if you're granted disability, does the amount awarded remain the same for the rest of your life, or is there an increase each year?
There's an increase each year. It's based on the allowances and the increases that they do at Congress, and it's minimal, but they do increase. Likewise, when you're applying for disability and you're looking at retroactive monies, they also increase. So every year it does go up. It's not a set number.
Right. And so if your SSDI is higher than your full retirement, what happens when you actually turn toward getting full retirement? Does your number go down, or does it remain the same as what you were getting with the Social Security income?
So I think that you get the higher number always. I think Social Security always, based on the experience that I have dealing with the government, they put you in the program which will grant you the most amount of money that you're entitled to.
Okay, thank you for that. Jeffrey writes, is rental income defined as passive or against your SSDI?
Very good question. Very often litigated. The question becomes, what do you do to maintain that rental property? which would be considered work. And then rental income is work. So it's not passive. So
Really?
it becomes very, very litigated, and it's at every level of Social Security. So that's an issue. I would actually just say put the property in somebody else's name and get like don't get caught up in that, because it is an issue that gets litigated, and you have to prove that you don't do anything, and it's very hard to prove something you don't do.
Jeffrey Lagomasini says gracias. But I'm going to say, Jeffrey, I think you should speak with another attorney about this and make sure that you can't get it. I mean, because I've heard the opposite. So
it is both. It is both. I'm just trying to avoid conflicts.
yeah, I got it. All right. So again, there's somebody else asking if you can write a book and still receive your Social Security income.
When did you write the book? Is the question the government
I think what she's saying is, can she like write a book now and still, while she's already getting Social Security income, and can she write a book to receive more further income?
I understand. So that would be self-employment if the book takes off, and that would go against, that would be as, it'll be considered earnings. So you're raising a red flag.
Okay. All right. Next, let's go to the next thing. Do the payments end at death, or is there a survivor benefit?
There are surviving benefits, but the payments end at death for you. Surviving benefits would be for, there's a type of benefit that goes to a widow. It has to be within a person over age 50 that is disabled, and the death has to be within 7 years of the disability, or it has to be a child who's disabled child they can continue to receive under their parents. But if not, the benefits stop at death.
Okay, thank you for that. Next one. What happens if you are on SSDI for a short or long term and the federal government wants to, I think we already discussed this, wants to cut your Social Security? Did we already discuss that?
We did discuss it, yep. 10 days to make sure that you continue your benefits in terms of payment, and you appeal, and you make sure that you can show that your condition has not improved.
So what happens if you do get cut and you bring in an attorney the first time and that attorney cannot get you reinstated? Do you have the option to still go after do it again with another attorney? Or is it mandated and final?
Option, Stu. No, Stu. You always have the option of finding another attorney, but that decision has to then be appealed by the next attorney. So let's say you have an attorney that messes up your case, and then you go to somebody else. I have to know that I have grounds for appeal.
Okay, thank you. All right, so overall, again, just to wrap things up, how long for the review process from the time you first submit?
1.5 to 3 years.
Okay, long time. So for everybody out there, if you haven't done it yet, I hope that you have a good pocketbook or purse or bank account or whatever, because you're going to have to hold on to it for a while. And that's another thing. So are you allowed to receive money from elsewhere, like family and whatever, while you're waiting in the process? I mean, unlike when you're trying to buy a house, you're not allowed to take money from people just to get money to put down a deposit.
So yes, if it's an SSDI case, because you paid money into the system and your resources don't affect. But no, if you're an SSI case. If you're an SSI case, which is indigent welfare based, you didn't pay enough money in, then you need to borrow the money. People can't give you the money, because if people supported you, the government doesn't need to support you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. All right. So we heard how long the process could possibly be. How short can the process possibly be?
Process could be as short as a couple months. You can apply for benefits, submit all the papers, show that you've been out of work for 12 months or more, or have a condition that's expected to result in death. You can submit all your medical records together showing you meet a certain listing, and you can win the case very quickly. I would say we have probably a 3 or 4% that win their case within the first 2 months. And then they say, well, I didn't even need a lawyer. I didn't even need you. Why am I paying you? Because I didn't even need you. And I'll say, well, first of all, I submitted all your paperwork with all the information. And second of all, in my case, I have a reputation where the offices know if I take a case, it's because I believe I can win it. So I mean, 30 years in now, finally I get a little bit of like pat on the back, and that's why you hire an attorney. So that gives you a long way. So
Sure.
I'd say about 3% win that way, and then when you file a reconsideration, you may get at least 5 or 7% of your cases won like that. So
Okay.
yes.
So a person wrote in that the process on their website is showing 10 months. All right. And then another person's writing that he was lucky to have been approved in 2 months. And that's great. Congratulations on that one. Another person is writing is income. Okay, we already did that one about how the income is gotten. And another person writes to just let everybody know that Lisa is the best attorney around because she knows, and I'm not going to say her name, but that's it because evidently she has.
That's so nice.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
And
that's nice to hear.
Great. So now we're at the end of our questions between paper. Another one came in. I don't see another one. Oh, there is another one online. All right. What is the process to actually apply? I don't think that's the question. What is the attorney fee? That's the question. What is the fee for you to get paid, and how do you get paid?
Okay. So we take nothing. Like nobody should ever pay a penny when they need an attorney. When you start a case, it's completely on contingency. There's no payment unless you win. And every amount of money that an attorney gets in this kind of practice is approved by the judge and the Social Security Administration. It's only released after your money comes in, and it's done based on a 25% of your retroactive fee, and just now it went up from $6,000 to a maximum of $7,200 total. So that means you hire an attorney, the attorney takes care of filing your case, doing the paperwork, answering the phone calls, setting up appointments for you, going into a hearing, obtaining your medical records. We pay for the requests of records. We pay for the medical records, all at no cost to you. If we win, and I am not a gambler, so if we win, when we win, then the government authorizes 25%, no more than $7,200, and they pay us for that. We may ask for a reimbursement of our costs for medical records. I spend between $200 and $500 per client requesting their medical records, and that's something that I pay. And I pay it with the expectation of winning the case, and I pay it with the expectation that if I win the case, you receive your retroactive money, you will reimburse me for those out-of-pocket expenses that are separate and apart.
Thank you for that. I was going to be like wrapping it up, but now other people have to be writing more stuff here. So Rosalind is asking if you could. Rosalind's asking if you could please repeat what you were saying about owning a house or publishing a book.
If you are working and it's a result of work and effort that you put in, it's considered non-passive income. If it's coming to you, but you didn't do anything to receive that. So if the book was done prior to you becoming disabled and you're receiving royalties, it won't affect you. If likewise, if you have a house and you don't do anything to upkeep it and somebody's just paying you rent, it won't affect you. But if you're actively maintaining that residence, you're making sure the light bulbs are good, you're working, you're making phone calls, that could be considered work.
Okay, thank you. And another person, we've got too many of the same names here popping up with all different last names, but speaking of winning, on the off chance that donkeys, pigs, and unicorns fly, and I actually win the lottery, would that stop for the SSDI?
So it depends on the kind of benefits you're receiving, right? Like I said about the client I had yesterday who had a motor vehicle accident. He was receiving SSI. He had never worked and paid money into the system. The government was supporting him. He had a car accident. He had a big windfall and a personal injury claim. And then he got discontinued from receiving benefits. A person who's receiving SSI and wins a lottery, anything in excess of $2,000 will discontinue them from receiving benefits. If it's SSDI, which is monies that you are receiving because you worked and you paid money into the system, then you can go ahead and win the lottery. It can't affect you.
So I'm going to say, if you win the lottery, find somebody you really, really, really like and that they love you too, and give them the ticket to cash. Okay?
I'm going to give you one better. If you play the lottery, and because you made the effort of playing the lottery, you receive money, could they consider that work?
Could they?
Crazy
And
administration. They haven't.
And if you're going to win $1 million plus, screw the SSDI, right?
No, I disagree. When you look at the amount of healthcare problems and medical care, medications, it doesn't extend. It just doesn't. It's not worth it.
That's true, and you'll probably blow that $1 million quickly anyway. All right.
And that's taxable, right?
That's right. And so Michael writes he's going to go play the lottery tonight. And somebody else writes, what is the website again? I guess you're referring to your website?
Of course, that's the only website we're talking about.
Go ahead.
Yes.
What's your website?
So my law firm name is Gonzalez and Goetz, and that's Gonzalez, the ampersand, and then Goetz, it's Goetz, Gonzalez and Goetz. The website name is wegetyourdisability.com.
How do you spell the Goetz?
No, it's a play on words. G-E-T, wegetyourdisability.com. When we spelled it correctly, nobody was typing it in properly.
I'm writing it all out so I can then just send it to everybody here. And what is your email address?
My email address is Lisa, which is my name, Lisa,
really?
at gglaw.info. G as in good, law.info. I'm sorry, let me just finish with that, where if you go on the website and necesitas ver todo en español, hay una banderita de Puerto Rico, tocas en esa banderita y te cambia todo el website en español, con las preguntas más frecuentes.
What I told everybody is that her website is now accessible in Spanish. So you could go to a spot on the website and click on it to convert to Spanish, and then you could find all the information out there. So for everybody who did not understand what she just said, that's what she just said. All right, and you could turn on your friends and family to that if needed. All right. So again, thank you. And now I'm going to say good night. Good night.
Perfect. Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.